Lisa Martinez walked into her office early that morning, her coffee still steaming in the white ceramic mug she always used. The building was quiet, with only a few early workers typing at their desks. She had been Earth's main ambassador for 5 years now, and she knew this routine well. But today felt different. Her computer screen was blinking with a new message. The sender made her pause. It was from the Galactic Peace Council. These messages were rare and always important. Lisa sat down and opened the file. The invitation appeared on her screen in the formal style that all alien governments used. Gold lettering on a dark background, with symbols from 12 different species arranged in a circle. The message was clear and direct. Earth is invited to send representatives to the Peace Summit on Nexus Prime. We request that only civilian diplomats attend. No military personnel will be allowed. This restriction is final and cannot be changed. Lisa read the message 3 times. She had seen this same request many times before. Every peace summit, every trade meeting, every diplomatic gathering, the aliens always made the same demand. No human soldiers, no human military officers, no one who had ever served in Earth's armed forces. Other species brought their generals and admirals to these meetings. The Zephyrians always arrived with their war commanders in full crystal armor. The Andromedans brought their fleet captains, huge beings that looked like walking tanks. Even the peaceful Centauri brought their defense ministers, but never humans, never Earth's military. Paul Harrison knocked on her door and walked in without waiting for an answer. He was the director of the diplomatic corps, a tall man with gray hair who always seemed to know more than he let on. He had worked with aliens for 15 years. "I see you got the invitation," Paul said, sitting down across from her desk. "Same as always," Lisa replied. "They really don't want our military." "There." Paul smiled in a way that made Lisa think he was keeping a secret. "They're scared, Lisa. More scared than they've ever been." "Scared? Of what?" "We're the newest species in the galactic community. We've only had faster-than-light travel for 20 years. They have weapons that can destroy entire star systems." Paul walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Cars moved through the streets like tiny ants. People walked on sidewalks, going about their normal lives. They had no idea that their planet was part of something much bigger now. "Do you know why I became a diplomat, Lisa?" Paul asked. "You wanted to help people solve problems without fighting. Before this job, I was a colonel in the Marines. 25 years of military service. I fought in 3 wars before we met the aliens." Lisa looked at him with surprise. She had known Paul for years, but he had never mentioned being a soldier. The aliens don't know that, do they? "They know," Paul said, turning back to face her. "They know about all of us. They know that you were a captain in the Army. They know that your assistant Mary was a Navy intelligence officer. They know that half of our diplomatic staff used to be military. Then why do they keep inviting us to these meetings?" Paul sat back down and leaned forward. "Because they learned something about humans that scares them more than any weapon." At that same moment, on the other side of the solar system, Kate Sullivan was sitting in her office on Mars. The red planet had become humanity's main military base after first contact with the aliens. The underground facilities were huge, with room for 1 million soldiers and enough equipment to fight a war that could last for decades. Kate was a general, the highest-ranking military officer in the human space fleet. She had short black hair and scars on her hands from her years as a fighter pilot. The walls of her office were covered with pictures of Earth, pictures of her family, and pictures of the soldiers she had served with. Her computer was also blinking, with a message. It was from Lisa Martinez. "The Peace Council wants to meet again. Same rules as always. No military allowed. They're really afraid of us showing up to these things." Kate laughed and typed back a reply. "Maybe they should be afraid." Her assistant, Colonel Dan Brooks, walked into the office carrying a stack of reports. Dan was young for his rank, only 35 years old, but he was one of the smartest tactical officers in the fleet. "General, I don't understand something," Dan said, setting the reports on her desk. "What's that?" "Why do the aliens always ban us from these peace meetings? Every other species brings military advisors. It's normal. It shows strength and preparation. Kate picked up one of the reports and started reading. It was about human peacekeeping missions in the outer colonies. In the past 5 years, human forces had ended 12 different conflicts between alien species. They had done it without firing a single shot. Dan, do you know how we ended the war on Kepler Prime last year? We sent in Ambassador Martinez and her team. They got the two sides to sign a peace treaty in 3 days. Do you know what Ambassador Martinez did before she became a diplomat? Dan thought for a moment. She was in the army, wasn't she? She was a special operations officer. She spent 10 years planning missions behind enemy lines. She knows more about strategy and tactics than most generals. Kate stood up and walked to a large map on the wall. It showed all the known systems in the galaxy, with human colonies marked in blue and alien territories marked in different colors. The aliens think they're protecting themselves by keeping our military away from these meetings. What they don't understand is that they're not keeping our military away at all. I don't understand. Kate pointed to the map. Every human diplomat used to be military. Every trade negotiator used to be an intelligence officer. Every cultural advisor used to be a psychological warfare specialist. When we go to these peace summits, we're not sending civilians. We're sending our most experienced soldiers disguised as diplomats. Dan stared at the map, and slowly his expression changed as he understood what Kate was saying. So when they ban our military from these meetings, they're actually inviting our military to these meetings just without uniforms. Kate walked back to her desk and sat down. She picked up another report, this one about the upcoming peace summit. The aliens have been fighting wars for thousands of years. They know how to build weapons, how to command fleets, how to conquer planets, but they never learned the one thing that humans learned during our early wars, which is, the best way to win a war is to make sure your enemy doesn't realize they're in a war until it's already over. Kate looked out the window at the red landscape of Mars. In the distance, she could see the landing pads where Earth's diplomatic ships were being prepared for their next mission. Ambassador Martinez and her team will go to this peace summit, just like they always do. They'll wear business suits instead of uniforms. They'll carry briefcases instead of weapons. And they'll end conflicts that have been going on for decades, just by talking to people. And the aliens will never know what hit them. Exactly. On the crystal world of Zephyr 7, High Commander Veltar stood in the center of the war room. The walls were made of living crystal that glowed with a soft blue light. Around him, holographic images of military leaders from across the galaxy flickered and hummed with electronic life. Veltar had 4 arms and skin that looked like polished glass. He had been a soldier for 200 years, fighting in wars across 12 star systems. He knew battle tactics and strategy better than almost anyone in the galaxy. But right now, he was worried. The humans have accepted our invitation to the Peace Summit, he announced to the assembled leaders. His voice echoed in the crystal chamber. Fleet Admiral Corvex appeared in one of the holograms. He was from the Andromedan Empire, a massive being that stood 12 feet tall and weighed as much as a small vehicle. His species had been conquering planets for 5,000 years. Good, Corvex said in his deep, rumbling voice. We made it clear that no human military personnel are allowed. Their diplomats should be manageable. That's exactly what worries me, said General Thex from the Centauri Coalition. Thex looked like a tall, thin human, but his skin glowed with a faint golden light. His people were masters of energy weapons and force fields. Veltar activated another hologram. This one showed a human ship called the Harmony. It was smaller than most diplomatic vessels, painted white with blue markings. It looked harmless, almost friendly. Intelligence reports indicate that the humans are calling this mission Operation Olive Branch, Veltar said. The room fell silent. Every military leader in the galaxy knew about human operations. Even the ones with peaceful names had a way of changing everything. Olive Branch, repeated Commander Zara from the Sirius Defense Force. She was a cyborg, half machine and half organic with glowing red eyes. That sounds innocent enough. Human operations always sound innocent, warned Admiral Corvex. Remember Operation Friendship on Tau Ceti? They ended a 300-year civil war in 6 weeks. Or Operation Helping Hand in the Vega system, added General Thex. They turned 3 enemy fleets into allies before the enemy commanders even realized what was happening. Veltar manipulated the hologram to show more details about the human ship. Lists of names appeared in the air, glowing softly. They're bringing 60 diplomats, 37 cultural advisors, 23 trade specialists, and 45 civilian consultants. Civilian consultants? Asked Commander Zara. What does that mean? Veltar's 4 eyes focused on the list of names. Each name had a file attached to it. He had spent weeks reading these files, and what he found made him very nervous. Every single civilian consultant is former military. Admiral Helen Carter, who supposedly retired last month, is now listed as a conflict resolution specialist. The holographic images of the military leaders began to flicker with alarm. Several of them started making the sounds that their species made when they were afraid. Admiral Corvex leaned forward in his hologram. Helen Carter commanded the human fleet during the border wars. She never lost a single battle. Now she's a civilian consultant, Veltar said. And she's not the only one. More names appeared in the hologram. Each one came with a military record that made the assembled leaders more nervous. Dr. Amy Porter, cultural advisor, former psychological warfare specialist, 15 years of experience in breaking enemy morale without firing a shot. Rick Chen, trade negotiator, former strategic intelligence officer. He spent 20 years learning how to find weaknesses in enemy governments. Lisa Martinez, chief, ambassador, former special operations officer. She planned some of the most successful military missions in human history. General Thex's golden glow dimmed with worry. They're not sending diplomats to this peace summit. They're sending their best military commanders. But they're calling them diplomats, added Commander Zara. They're following our rules technically, but they're breaking the spirit of those rules completely, finished Admiral Corvex. Veltar closed the hologram and looked around the room at his fellow commanders. These were beings who had fought wars across the galaxy for centuries. They had weapons that could crack planets in half and shields that could stop the power of entire stars. But they were all afraid of 60 humans in business suits. There's something else, Veltar said quietly. What? Asked Admiral Corvex. Our intelligence suggests that this is how humans always conduct diplomacy. Every human diplomatic mission for the past 20 years has been staffed entirely by former military personnel. The silence in the room was complete now. Even the humming of the holographic equipment seemed quieter. You mean, said General Thex slowly, that every time we've negotiated with humans, we've actually been negotiating with their military? Every trade agreement, every territorial dispute, every peace treaty, confirmed Veltar, all handled by human soldiers pretending to be civilians. Commander Zara's mechanical parts whirred as she processed this information. No wonder they're so effective. They're not just diplomats. They're military strategists applying warfare principles to diplomacy. Admiral Corvex's image flickered with agitation. This explains the Rigel incident. When the Plasmoid Empire tried to invade human territory, the human ambassador convinced them to become trading partners instead. And the Proxima crisis, added General Thex. 3 different species were about to go to war over mining rights. The human diplomatic team got them to form a cooperative alliance in 2 days. Veltar activated a new display. This one showed a map of the galaxy, with human influence marked in blue. When humans first joined the galactic community 20 years ago, they controlled one small system around Earth. Now, blue lines connected dozens of systems. Look at this expansion pattern, Veltar said. It's not random. It's planned, methodical, strategic. Like a military campaign, whispered Commander Zara. Exactly like a military campaign. But instead of conquering territory with weapons, they're conquering it with friendship. Instead of forcing surrender with violence, they're forcing cooperation with mutual benefit. Admiral Corvex studied the map carefully. They're not just winning individual diplomatic missions, they're executing a long-term strategy to become the dominant power in the galaxy. And they're doing it by making everyone else think it was their own idea, said General Thex. Veltar deactivated the display and looked around the room one more time. Gentlemen, we have a problem. We've been trying to contain human military power by excluding their soldiers from diplomatic functions. But we haven't been excluding their soldiers at all, realized Commander Zara. We've been inviting their soldiers to diplomatic functions and giving them the perfect cover to operate without anyone suspecting what they really are. The meeting continued for several more hours. The military leaders discussed strategies, contingencies, and possible responses to the human diplomatic mission. But deep down, they all knew the truth. It was already too late. The humans had been fighting a war for 20 years, and the galaxy's greatest military powers had just realized they were in that war. The humans were winning, and they were winning, so completely that their enemies had been helping them win without even knowing it. As the holographic images faded and the meeting ended, Veltar stood alone in his crystal war room. He looked out through the transparent walls at his planet's twin moons rising over the horizon. Somewhere out there, a ship full of human diplomats was traveling toward the peace summit. They would arrive with smiles and handshakes, with offers of friendship and cooperation, with solutions to problems that had plagued the galaxy for centuries, and every single one of them was a soldier. The Nexus Prime space station floated in the darkness between stars like a massive jeweled crown. It was 3 miles across and shaped like a perfect sphere, with docking ports extending from its surface like the spokes of a wheel. The station had been built specifically for diplomatic meetings, designed so that no single species would feel uncomfortable or disadvantaged. Lisa Martinez looked out through the viewport of the human ship Harmony as they approached the station. She could see dozens of other vessels already docked there. The massive black ships of the Andromedan Empire, bristling with weapon arrays. The elegant crystal formations of Zephyrian cruisers that looked more like works of art than military vessels. The sleek silver ships of the Centauri Coalition, crackling with barely contained energy. "Quite a welcoming committee," said Amy Porter, standing beside her at the viewport. Amy was officially listed as Earth's chief cultural advisor, but Lisa knew her real background. 15 years in psychological operations with a specialty in reading enemy intentions and breaking down resistance without direct confrontation. "They're scared," observed Rick Chen from across the passenger compartment. Rick was handling trade negotiations for this mission, though his real expertise was in strategic intelligence. He had spent 20 years learning how to find weaknesses in opposing governments and exploit them for maximum advantage. Lisa nodded as she watched the alien ships. Their positioning wasn't random. The Andromedan vessels formed a defensive perimeter around the station. Zephyrian cruisers were arranged to provide overlapping fields of fire. Centauri ships maintained patrol patterns at the edge of sensor range. "Look at that formation," she said quietly. "Classic defensive positioning. They're expecting trouble." "From us?" asked Dr. Helen Carter, who was traveling as a civilian consultant in conflict resolution. 3 months ago, she had been Admiral Carter, commanding the entire human space fleet. Now she wore a simple gray business suit and carried nothing more threatening than a tablet computer. "From what we represent," Lisa replied. "Remember, everyone, we're here to discuss the Outer Rim conflicts. 3 different species have been fighting over territory and resources for 50 years. Our job is to find a peaceful solution." The Harmony docked at the station with barely a vibration. The human delegation gathered their belongings and prepared to disembark. 60 people in total, all wearing civilian clothes, all carrying briefcases and data tablets. To any outside observer, they looked like a group of business professionals heading to a corporate meeting. None of them looked like soldiers, but every single one of them was. The docking port opened, and Lisa led her team into the station. Receiving area was enormous, with a ceiling that stretched up 5 stories and walls decorated with artwork from 47 different worlds. The air smelled of ozone and exotic flowers, carefully calibrated to be pleasant to as many species as possible. Waiting for them was the usual diplomatic reception committee. Veltar was there, representing the Zephyrian military. His crystal skin reflected the station's lights in complex patterns, and his forearms were positioned in what Lisa recognized as a formal greeting posture, though his stance suggested he was ready to fight if necessary. Admiral Korvek stood nearby, his massive form casting a shadow across half the receiving area. The Andromedan's thick armor was polished to a mirror shine, and Lisa could see weapon ports built into his arms and chest. Even at a diplomatic function, he was a walking arsenal. General Thex glided forward on his energy field, his golden skin glowing brighter than usual. Lisa had studied Centauri body language extensively, and she knew that the increased luminosity indicated high stress levels. "Welcome to Nexus Prime," Veltar said, his voice carrying the harmonic overtones that all Zephyrians used for formal occasions. "We are pleased that Earth has accepted our invitation." "Thank you for having us," Lisa replied with a warm smile. "We're looking forward to working together on these important issues." She gestured to her team, and they spread out slightly, each person taking a position that looked casual but gave them optimal lines of sight and movement options. To the aliens, it probably looked like people stretching after a long journey. To Lisa, it looked like a special operations unit establishing a secure perimeter. "Your accommodations have been prepared," Admiral Corvex rumbled. "The opening ceremony will begin in 6 hours. "Excellent," said Amy Porter, stepping forward, with her tablet. "I've prepared some cultural background materials that might help everyone understand the perspectives of the Outer Rim species. Sometimes these conflicts are rooted in misunderstandings that go back generations." She handed data chips to each of the alien commanders. Lisa watched their faces as they accepted the chips. Veltar's crystal features seemed to dim slightly. Corvex's armor plates shifted in what Lisa recognized as a defensive posture. Thex's glow flickered with uncertainty. They were afraid of information warfare. They suspected that Amy's cultural materials might contain psychological manipulation designed to influence their thinking. They were probably right. "We should get settled in," Lisa said. "It's going to be a busy few days." The human delegation was escorted to their quarters in the diplomatic section of the station. Their rooms were comfortable but simple, with furniture that could be adjusted for different species. Lisa's room had a large viewport that showed the stars outside, and she spent a few minutes just looking out at the darkness. There was a soft knock on her door. She opened it to find Rick Chen standing in the hallway. "I've been doing some research on the station systems," he said quietly. "Very interesting setup they have here." "Oh?" "The communication networks are incredibly sophisticated. Every conversation in every room is being monitored and analyzed by computer systems from 12 different species. They're trying to build psychological profiles of our entire team." Lisa smiled. "Let them. Amy's been feeding false information into her voice patterns all day. By now, their computers probably think she's a pacifist who's terrified of conflict. And you? According to their analysis, I'm probably a career bureaucrat who's never made a difficult decision in her life." Rick grinned. "Helen's been playing up her retirement angle. She's been complaining about her arthritis and talking about how much she misses her grandchildren." "Perfect. The more harmless we seem, the more effective we'll be when the real work starts." 6 hours later, the opening ceremony began in the station's Great Hall. The room was vast, with seating arranged in concentric circles around a central speaking platform. Each species had their own section, decorated in their traditional colors and symbols. The alien delegations entered first, and Lisa watched them carefully. Each group was led by their diplomatic representatives, but they were surrounded by military advisors in full dress uniforms. Weapons were prominently displayed. Honor guards marched in precise formations. Everything about their presentation was designed to project strength and readiness for war. Then it was time for the human delegation to enter. Lisa walked into the Great Hall wearing her simple blue business suit. Behind her came 60 humans, in equally unremarkable clothing. No uniforms, no weapons, no honor guard. They looked like accountants heading to a budget meeting. The contrast was stunning. The Great Hall, which had been filled with the sounds of conversation and the movement of hundreds of beings, fell completely silent. Every eye in the room turned to watch the humans take their seats. Lisa could feel the weight of that attention. She knew what the aliens were thinking. How could these ordinary-looking people be representatives of a species that had ended more conflicts in 20 years than the rest of the galaxy had ended in the previous century? The answer was simple, though the aliens didn't realize it yet. They weren't ordinary people at all. As Lisa took her seat, she made brief eye contact with Amy Porter. Amy nodded slightly, indicating that she had already begun reading the room, analyzing the body language and stress indicators of every major figure present. Across the aisle, Rick Chen was reviewing data on his tablet, but Lisa knew he was actually mapping the political relationships and power structures of every delegation. In the hall, behind them, Helen Carter was adjusting her glasses and looking like a grandmother at a school board meeting. In reality, she was conducting a tactical assessment of the entire facility, identifying potential choke points, escape routes, and strategic advantages. The opening ceremony proceeded according to ancient diplomatic tradition. Speakers from each major power gave formal addresses about the importance of peace, the need for cooperation, and their hopes for a successful summit. Lisa listened politely, but her mind was already working on the real challenge. Somewhere in the Outer Rim, 3 species were locked in a conflict that had cost millions of lives. They had been fighting for so long that most of them had forgotten what they were fighting about. Tomorrow, the real negotiations would begin, and when they did, the galaxy would see what happened when Earth's military went to war armed with nothing but words, smiles, and an unshakable belief that every problem had a solution. The ceremony ended, and the delegations began to file out of the Great Hall. As Lisa stood to leave, she noticed that the alien military commanders were watching her team very carefully. They were right to be worried. The war had already begun. The peace talks had been going smoothly for 2 days. Representatives from the Outer Rim conflict sat around a circular table, discussing territory boundaries and resource rights with the patience that came from 50 years of unsuccessful negotiations. Lisa Martinez and her team observed from the gallery, taking notes and occasionally offering suggestions that helped move conversations forward. Then everything changed. The alarm began as a low humming sound that gradually grew louder. Red lights flashed along the walls of the conference room, and holographic displays appeared showing urgent messages in 12 different alien languages. "Emergency situation," announced the station's computer system in its calm, synthetic voice. "All diplomatic personnel report to secure areas immediately." Veltar rose from his seat at the observer's table, his crystal skin flashing with patterns of alarm. "What's the nature of the emergency?" Admiral Korvex was already activating his personal communication device, his massive fingers manipulating controls built into his armor. "Pirate attack," he rumbled. 3 light hours from here. Outer Rim raiders have attacked a civilian transport convoy. The conference room erupted into activity. Diplomatic staff members hurried toward the exits, while military advisors gathered around holographic displays that showed tactical information about the attack. General Thex glided to the center of the room, his golden glow pulsing with urgency. 17 ships, mixed cargo and passenger vessels, approximately 8,000 civilians on board. "How many attackers?" asked Veltar. "Unknown. Long-range sensors show at least 12 raider vessels, possibly more hiding in the asteroid field." Lisa watched, the chaos around her with professional interest. This was exactly the kind of crisis that could derail peace negotiations for months. The Outer Rim species would blame each other for inadequate security. The galactic powers would argue about response protocols. By the time anyone took action, the pirates would be long gone and the civilians would be dead. Amy Porter appeared, beside her, tablet in hand. "Interesting timing," she said quietly. "You think it's deliberate?" Pirates don't usually attack convoys this close to major diplomatic events unless they're trying to make a point. Rick Chen joined them, looking up from his own analysis. "The convoy route takes them through space claimed by all 3 Outer Rim species. If the pirates succeed, each side will blame the others for failing to provide protection, which will destroy any chance of peace," concluded Helen Carter, who had been listening from her seat nearby. "Someone wants these negotiations to fail." Veltar was coordinating with his military commanders through his communication implants. Lisa could see the stress patterns in his crystal skin as he processed multiple information streams simultaneously. "Battle Group 7 and 12 are closest to the attack site," he announced. Estimated arrival time 14 hours. 14 hours? General Thex's glow flared brighter. The pirates will be finished and gone in 3 hours. The civilians don't have 14 hours. Admiral Korvex brought up a tactical display that showed the positions of all military units in the area. Colored dots represented different fleets moving slowly across a three-dimensional map of local space. We have 17 battle groups within range, he said, but they're all positioned for station defense. It will take time to reorganize them for a rescue operation. How much time? Asked Commander Zara, who had just arrived in the conference room. Minimum 12 hours for reorganization and deployment. The convoy will be dead by then. Lisa stood up and walked toward the tactical display. The alien commanders turned to look at her, apparently surprised that a human diplomat would approach their military planning session. "May I ask a question?" she said politely. Veltar's four arms moved in what Lisa recognized as a gesture of reluctant permission. "Of course, Ambassador Martinez. What exactly are the pirates trying to accomplish?" "They're raiders," Admiral Korvex rumbled. "They want to steal cargo and sell the passengers as slaves." "But why this convoy? Why this location? Why now?" The alien commanders exchanged glances. General Thex spoke first. "Does it matter? We need to respond to the immediate threat." Lisa smiled and gestured to Amy Porter. "Actually, it matters quite a lot." "Amy, what do you think?" Amy stepped forward with her tablet, looking every bit the cultural advisor she was pretending to be. "Well, from an anthropological perspective, raider attacks often follow predictable patterns based on economic and social pressures." She activated her tablet and projected a holographic map that overlaid the tactical display. This map showed trade routes, economic data, and population centers throughout the region. "Look at the timing," she continued. The attack began exactly 47 minutes after the morning trade broadcasts announced increased security patrols in the Kepler sector. That forced the raiders to look for targets in unprotected areas. "So they chose the convoy route," said Veltar. "Not randomly. Look at the cargo manifest." Amy highlighted specific data points on her display. Medical supplies for the Rigel colonies, manufacturing equipment for the Vega system, and cultural artifacts being returned to the Centauri worlds. Admiral Korvex studied the information. High-value cargo, easy to sell, but also politically sensitive, Rick Chen added, stepping up to join the conversation. "If those cultural artifacts are destroyed or stolen, it could damage Centauri relations with the Outer Rim species for decades." Lisa nodded. "Which brings us back to the timing. Someone planned this attack to cause maximum political damage during our peace negotiations." Commander Zara's mechanical parts whirred as she processed this information. "You think the pirates are working for someone who wants the negotiations to fail?" "I think the pirates are a symptom, not the disease," Lisa said. "The real question is, how do we solve the immediate problem while addressing the underlying issue?" General Thex's glow dimmed with frustration. "Even if you're right about their motives, we still can't reach them in time with our current deployment." "Actually," said Helen Carter, speaking up from her position near the back of the room, "I think we can." All eyes turned to the elderly woman who was supposed to be a civilian consultant in conflict resolution. Helen walked slowly to the tactical display, moving with the careful steps of someone whose arthritis was bothering her. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the display controls. Veltar hesitated, then activated guest access for the human systems. Helen began manipulating the display with surprising skill for someone who claimed to be a retired civilian. "The problem with your current approach," she said conversationally, "is that you're thinking like military commanders planning a fleet engagement." "We are military commanders," Admiral Korvex pointed out. "Exactly. But this isn't a military problem. It's a logistics problem with a time constraint." Helen's fingers moved across the holographic controls and the tactical display transformed. Instead of showing battle formations and weapon ranges, it now displayed approach vectors, timing calculations, and resource allocation matrices. "You don't need to fight the pirates," she continued. You need to rescue the civilians, and you don't need to use your battle groups to do it. She highlighted a series of smaller ships scattered throughout the system. Courier vessels, supply ships, medical transports, fast, maneuverable, and already in position. Those aren't combat vessels, protested General Thex. They don't need to be. Look at the timing. Helen adjusted the display to show movement patterns over time. If you coordinate a multi-vector approach using your fastest non-combat ships, you can reach the convoy in 4 hours. The pirates will destroy any rescue ships that aren't heavily armed, said Commander Zara. Helen smiled, and for just a moment, Lisa saw the admiral she used to be beneath the grandmother disguise. Not if they're too busy dealing with other problems. The display shifted again, now showing communication frequencies and signal patterns. The pirates are using a standard radar communication protocol, very secure, very efficient, but it has one weakness. Which is? Asked Veltar. It's designed to coordinate attacks, not to handle multiple simultaneous emergencies. Amy Porter stepped forward with her own tablet. Helen's right. If we can create enough confusion in their communication network, their coordination will break down. How do you create confusion in a secure military communication system? Admiral Korvax asked. Rick Chen grinned. You give them too much information to process at once. Lisa watched the alien commanders as her team explained their plan. Helen showed them how to use their scattered support vessels as a coordinated rescue fleet. Amy outlined the psychological tactics needed to overwhelm the pirate communication system. Rick provided intelligence about radar command structures and decision-making processes. To the aliens, it probably looked like a group of civilian consultants offering helpful suggestions. Lisa knew better. She was watching 3 of humanity's most experienced military strategists execute a complex tactical plan in real time. This is, Veltar paused, his crystal skin flickering with patterns of amazement. This is actually feasible. More than feasible, said General Thex. It's elegant. Admiral Korvax was studying the projected success rates. 93% probability of successful civilian rescue. 0 projected casualties among rescue personnel. The rescue operation had succeeded perfectly, just as Helen Carter predicted. All 8,000 civilians were safe. The pirates had been captured alive, and not a single rescue ship had been damaged. The convoy was back on course, and the crisis that could have destroyed the peace negotiations had been resolved in less than 6 hours. But in the days that followed, Lisa Martinez noticed that the alien military commanders were watching her team with different eyes. The question started. Small, casual comments about the humans' remarkable problem-solving abilities. Observations about their unusual approach to crisis management. Polite inquiries about Earth's diplomatic training programs. Lisa handled each question carefully, giving answers that were truthful but incomplete. Yes, Earth valued creative thinking. Yes, they trained their diplomats to handle complex situations. Yes, they believed that most problems had solutions if you looked at them from the right angle. She never mentioned that every member of her team had spent decades learning to solve problems under the kind of pressure that would break most people. She never explained that what the aliens saw as remarkable creativity was actually the result of military training designed to find victory in impossible situations. On the 4th day of the summit, High Commander Veltar requested a private meeting with Lisa. They met in a small conference room with crystal walls that overlooked the stars. Veltar had dimmed his natural glow to a level that indicated serious conversation. Ambassador Martinez, he began, we need to discuss something that deeply concerns me. Lisa nodded and took a seat across from him. Of course, Commander. What's troubling you? Your people, your team, the way they handled the pirate crisis. Veltar's forearms moved in patterns that Lisa recognized as expressions of confusion and worry. I've been a military commander for 200 years. I've studied tactics and strategy from across the galaxy, but I've never seen anything like what your civilians accomplished. We're proud of our diplomatic corps, Lisa said carefully. That's just it. They don't think like diplomats, they don't even think like civilians. Veltar leaned forward, his crystal features catching the starlight. They think like soldiers. Very, very good soldiers. Lisa remained silent, waiting to see where this conversation would lead. Dr. Amy Porter, Veltar continued. During the crisis, she analyzed the pirates' psychological profile and communication patterns in minutes. That's not cultural advisory work. That's intelligence analysis at the highest level. Amy is very talented. Rick Chen identified the political implications of the attack before we even understood what was happening. He mapped the entire conspiracy behind the pirate raid while we were still counting ships. Rick has always been good with details. And Helen Carter. Veltar's glow flickered with something that might have been awe. She solved a military crisis that had stumped some of the best tactical minds in the galaxy. She did it in 20 minutes, using methods that none of us had even considered. Lisa waited, knowing that Veltar was building toward something important. Ambassador, I've done some research on your people. All of your people. Veltar activated a holographic display that showed personnel files for the entire human diplomatic team. Every single member of your delegation has a military background. The files scrolled past, each one showing years of service in Earth's armed forces. Special operations officers, intelligence specialists, psychological warfare experts, strategic planners. The cream of humanity's military establishment, all supposedly retired and working as civilian diplomats. Dr. Porter spent 15 years in psychological operations. Mr. Chen was a strategic intelligence officer for 20 years. Ms. Carter was... Veltar paused, his glow dimming further. Ms. Carter was Admiral Carter until 3 months ago. She commanded your entire space fleet. Lisa looked at the files scrolling past on the holographic display. There was no point in denying what Veltar had discovered. The truth was there in black and white, documented in personnel records that were technically public information. You're right, she said quietly. And you, Ambassador Martinez, Captain Lisa Martinez, Special Operations, 15 years of service, decorated for actions in 12 different conflicts. Veltar's 4 eyes focused on her intently. You're not a civilian at all. No, Lisa admitted. I'm not. The silence stretched between them for a long moment. Outside the crystal walls, the stars wheeled slowly in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small drama being played out in the conference room. Why? Veltar asked finally. Why do you hide this from us? Why pretend to be civilians when you're clearly military personnel? Lisa stood up and walked to the viewport looking out at the starfield. Because you asked us to. What do you mean? 20 years ago, when humanity first made contact with the galactic community, we followed standard protocol. We sent military representatives to diplomatic functions just like everyone else. But after our first few meetings, the Galactic Council made a specific request. Lisa turned back to face Veltar. They asked us to send only civilian diplomats to future meetings. No military personnel whatsoever. Because you were afraid of us. Afraid of what human military thinking could do to the careful balance of galactic politics. Veltar's crystal skin flickered with patterns of memory. I remember those. Early meetings, your military advisors were unsettling. They solved problems too quickly. They found solutions that no one else had considered. They ended conflicts that had been going on for decades, sometimes in a matter of hours. So you agreed to send only civilians. Lisa smiled, and for the first time in the conversation, it was a genuine expression of warmth rather than diplomatic politeness. We agreed to send only people you would classify as civilians, but they're all former military. Commander, let me ask you a question. When a soldier retires from active duty but continues to work in defense-related fields, are they civilian or military? Technically civilian, I suppose. And when a career military officer transitions to diplomatic service, using the same skills they developed during their military career, are they civilian or military? Veltar was quiet for a moment, processing the implications of Lisa's words. You're saying that every human diplomatic mission is staffed entirely by former military personnel? Yes. We don't have a separate diplomatic corps the way other species do. Our diplomats are our retired soldiers, using the skills they learned, during their military careers to achieve peaceful objectives. But that means Veltar's glow began to pulse rapidly as the full realization hit him. It means that when you exclude Earth's military from diplomatic functions, you're not actually excluding our military at all. You're just making sure they're not wearing uniforms. Lisa walked back to her seat and sat down facing Veltar. Commander, what do you think happens when you take a soldier who has spent 30 years learning how to win wars and ask them to negotiate peace? They treat negotiation like warfare. Exactly. They analyze the opposing forces, identify strategic objectives, develop tactical plans, and execute operations designed to achieve total victory. But their objective is peace, not conquest, which makes them far more dangerous than any conventional military force. Veltar's forearms moved in agitation. More dangerous? How? Because conventional military forces try to defeat their enemies. Our diplomatic corps tries to convert their enemies into allies, and they use every psychological, strategic, and tactical skill they learned during their military careers to make that conversion seem like the enemy's own idea. Lisa gestured toward the viewport, where the lights of the rescued convoy were still visible in the distance. Look at what happened during the pirate crisis. Helen didn't just solve the immediate problem. She solved it in a way that made every military commander in the room feel like they had contributed to the solution. She gave you a victory that you could claim as your own, while demonstrating human superiority and tactical thinking, while demonstrating human commitment to galactic peace and cooperation. Veltar was silent for a long time, his crystal features reflecting the starlight in complex patterns. When he finally spoke, his voice was very quiet. How long has this been going on? Since our first diplomatic mission 20 years ago. Every negotiation, every treaty, every trade agreement, all handled by human military personnel operating under civilian cover, and the expansion of human influence throughout the galaxy, is the result of a coordinated strategic campaign executed by some of the most experienced military minds in human history. Veltar stood up and walked to the viewport much as Lisa had done earlier. He looked out at the stars for several minutes before turning back to her. Ambassador Martinez, do you realize what you've just told me? I've told you the truth. You've told me that humanity has been conducting a military campaign against the entire galaxy for 20 years. A campaign so sophisticated that we've been helping you win it without even realizing we were in a war. Lisa shook her head. Not a campaign against the galaxy, Commander. A campaign for the galaxy. What's the difference? We're not trying to conquer you. We're not trying to subjugate you or steal your territory or enslave your people. Lisa stood up and faced him directly. We're trying to save you. Save us? From what?